Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training from chaos to clarity, securing and scaling your agency's data. Hi, it is great to have you with us. My name is Emily Jarvis, and I'm the Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop. And today I have the added pleasure of also being your moderator. So thanks so much for joining me. And a special thank you to our partners at Veeam for helping us put on this session today. So let's get to it because many agencies are falling behind in their efforts to streamline operations. And one key culprit is the lack of a unified data approach in managing data in hybrid and multi-cloud environments. And as an agency's data is its single most valuable asset, but it's only that when it's secure, resilient, and handled by a skilled workforce. So, today our experts will share how to create a unified data resilience program and how that works in the cloud. But before we get to all of that, I do have a few housekeeping items to go over with you all. So, first things first, we have some great resources available for you on the console, and we're going to be talking about these resources as we go through today's session. So make sure you check out those additional learning opportunities. That resources tab is also where you can find out a little bit more about our speakers. So I encourage you to check that out. If you need the closed captioning icon, just look for that show captions icon along the bottom right-hand side of your screen. And that's where you'll find that added accessibility. Now, we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but they can and do happen. And if they do, send us a message to that Q&A tab, and my colleague Maddie will get your questions answered. And here is the secret and most important sauce of today's training, because it's in that same portal where you can ask our experts questions. So don't you dare be shy. Put your questions in early and often. You can also, of course, chat with your fellow attendees using that chat icon. Let us know where you're logging in from. I'm in very toasty Rockville, Maryland, which is just outside of DC. So let us know where you all are logging in from. Finally, we are recording this training, so check your inboxes tomorrow because we'll email you a link so you can watch the entire session on demand or send it along to one of your colleagues. Oh, Las Vegas, Nevada, Mike, that might be even warmer than we are here in Rockville. So I'll take that. All right, with all of this housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce you to our speakers. Joining us, we have Rebecca Kai, who is the Chief Data Officer for the state of Hawaii, and Jeff Reichard, who is the Vice President for Solutions Strategy at Veeam. Thank you both so much for being with us today. So, Jeff, I'm going to start with you a little bit here because I think one of the things that is essential to the current environment right now is that agencies really are looking to streamline and have this unified approach to data. And one of the ways that you can do that is obviously in the cloud. So, talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing from some of your government partners when it comes to the current state of the multi-cloud environment and where data is playing a role there.
Yeah, absolutely. We can discuss that, and I'll be very interested in Rebecca's account of how things are looking in Hawaii as well. There are some consistent things that we've seen. A lot of projects that were in place to cloud enable or totally migrate to the cloud for some functions that governments are that public sector is providing for its customers, obviously accelerated by COVID, and those things have not been backed out of. We are seeing citizen services at all levels of government provided much, much more in the cloud than they were even as late as 2019. The infrastructure that we're tending to see for data here at Veeam is roughly one half still on premises and one half in the cloud. And that, of course, is divided between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and wildly popular SaaS platforms like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 and things like that. On-prem, what we typically see and what our research shows is that on-prem workloads are still divided between roughly half physical servers, maybe a little bit less than half physical servers, and half or a little more than half virtualization platforms. And we're seeing that virtualization shift, because of some cost concerns that are being brought on by the Broadcom acquisition of VMware not too long ago, we seldom have conversations with organizations that are not looking at changing something that they're doing one way or another because they're facing bigger maintenance bills. The challenge, to get to your question about how you streamline that kind of thing, is that we used to have a pretty good handle on things like what our regulatory compliance mandates were when everything was sitting under our roof. And that is still not the case as much now that about half of the services and the data that we count on isn't sitting in our data centers now. It's sitting in other places. And so we're still seeing some growing pains. And frankly, I think we will be for a while around how we keep up with protecting critical data, how we make sure we can move it if and when we need to, and how to make sure we don't get caught flat-footed if something bad happens.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Rebecca, from your perspective, I think one of the things that is clear in kind of what Jeff was talking about is that having that unified approach to data is so critical. Where do you see this happening right now, and how is the state really approaching data kind of consolidation, security? How are you thinking that as kind of a whole?
Yeah, so like Jeff mentioned that there is the current state that there's a mixture of multi-cloud environments plus aged legacy systems, including mainframe systems
Yeah.
with the government. So because the security and the trust is always the top priority for government data handling, so that's why you still see mainframe systems and the non-cloud solutions. But in the meantime, government is embracing new technologies from cloud to even AI now to improve operational efficiency and the service to our residents. So if you look at, but each agency has its own business priority and the timelines
Yeah.
and different compliance requirements. So with some vendor lock-in fears that I heard also, so that creates the data governance complexity. So with inconsistent classification, tagging, there's no visibility to all the data we have today on hands to solve a certain business problem. For example, if we have a disaster, we need data from human services, from health, from education, everywhere. So that's when it's really critical to make sure that we have a consolidated, consistent data governance structure where we can link the data together, we can have the data lineage, we understand what data we have, and we classify them, and we can easily share the data when there's a mission critical, requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because I think both of you articulated this really well, but I think sometimes it makes so much sense, right? We're going to have this consolidated system where we're all speaking the same language, we're classifying data in the same way, so that when disaster strikes, when you're just looking for good data to maybe build a new policy or a new program, maybe it doesn't have to be a disaster, but
Yeah.
it makes sense, right? But then I think about my own personal usages of data, and the way I classify things is very different sometimes than even my colleagues at GovLoop. And we're talking about a team of 14. We're not talking about agencies that are large in size and diverse. And so I can really see how this problem would definitely scale out. Jeff, it looked like you were going to add on to something as well. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I just want to say, and Rebecca did a great job of pointing this out. I think people who look at the cybersecurity side will
Mhm.
notice Rebecca mentioned governance and actually getting a handle on all the data that you've got. When the update to the NIST cybersecurity framework came out last year, people that were familiar with the domains that previously were part of that will notice that there's an overarching domain of data governance, and that is especially critical now that we are finding the ability to do things with our data that we never used to be able to do, particularly with AI being adopted so much at such a large scale. And I'll be interested to hear how Hawaii is working on that and what your experience has been in that area. So
Yeah. All right. So, moving along here, I want to remind our attendees, don't wait until the bitter end to put your questions in. We want them throughout. And you two have kind of hinted at this already. And Rebecca, I'll come to you first with this one. I think some of the challenges are a little bit more apparent, but where do you see some of the biggest barriers as you're working with the state to modernize operations, to find ways to share or consolidate this data in a more effective way? Where are the biggest
Mm.
pain points?
Yeah, so first of all, we have a lot of siloed systems.
Mm.
We're from Hawaii, so we use analogy of islands, right?
Uh,
Each each agency is its own island. It's optimized for its own operations. And by law, they are supposed to provide health or human services or, law enforcement. They're really centralized on their critical missions, optimized for their own operations. They're not for optimized for interoperability because they are not aware of other people's need because they're so laser focused on their own services, right? So what causes the challenge is that the data is often locked in the different formats, uh,
mhm,
with no access control for others, which is to protect the data, right? So that's create a challenge to share the data and to perform some analysis across departments because there are a lot of business problems that require cross-departmental data. So that's the first one, silo system. The second is missing a holistic data governance strategy.
yeah.
Agencies all try to govern their own data, but just like you mentioned, right? You govern your data
Right.
differently, your
Mhm.
colleagues, right? Everyone has great attention intention and they all have different timelines. So
Mhm,
I could start governing my data today, and then Jeff might not be having a free hand until next year. So that
mhm,
creates different challenges because we are not talking to each other. We're all focused on our own operations. In that case, we might not be using the same tool and we might not be using the same cloud solution. So for a true citizen-centric services, this is causing a challenge. And
mhm,
also, not to mention that we have a security and compliance complexity.
mhm,
The agencies have different compliance requirements and they host different types of data.
mhm,
So for example, human services normally they lead in data privacy, but others might not be, have the, a high bar for data privacy. So manual compliance efforts, they don't scale, but automating solutions are not consistently implemented. The last one for the government, procurement and budgeting constraints. We
Yep.
need to ask for money to be able to do it, and it's a yearly cycle. Yeah.
Uh, and you hope it's a yearly cycle, at least on the federal side. They're getting months at
Oh,
best. Obviously, today we're talking more on the state and local side, but the procurement cycle is very, very difficult, and the budgeting
yeah,
cycle. That makes a whole lot of sense. So,
yeah.
Jeff, she outlined three really powerful challenges. We'll call them big barriers that agencies are facing. Any additional ones you'd add to this mix or things that you see agencies maybe overlook as they're trying to set up a good data governance policy?
So the points that Rebecca made were right on. They're exactly what we hear from data officers and folks that are tasked with governance, risk, and compliance in state and local and federal customers that we speak with. There are some knock-on challenges that also emerge as barriers to getting a consistent view of data and being able to for agencies to make use of their data in a more holistic way. One of those is that uh, very often in this day and age, the way that you attempt to get a consistent look at data is by putting it in the cloud. You pull together disparate data sources and you put them in the cloud so that you can apply analytics or put them in a data lake or do other kinds of things with them. When you do that, you are, of course, extending the footprint that is vulnerable to attack by bad actors who might seek either to steal data or to encrypt it and bring your operations down. we have seen that some of the biggest data breaches that have happened because of things like unsecured object storage buckets up in the cloud. And there are private and public sector organizations back when the European General Data Protection Regulation came out that
Mm-hmm.
ended up paying multi-million euro fines because they had unsecured things with personally identifiable data in them. That is put into sharper focus because we still see that public sector organizations are tied for first in being attacked by threat actors because of some of the other reasons that Rebecca mentioned. The data is valuable. It is valuable both to the organization and to the individual citizens whose data it is. And frequently there are budget constraints that mean that state and local government can have some challenges around implementing security that some other types of organizations, like large banks that are very, very profitable, don't run into, right? They're not dependent on public sector funding and public sector cycles. The other challenge that you get into with this, and Rebecca touched on this as well with compliance, is that again, while we have a pretty good idea of what we need to do around compliance with data that's sitting on-prem because we've had it in our data centers for decades, a lot of folks assume that security is taken care of when you move that data up to cloud platforms and sort of overlook the fact that every single cloud platform has a shared responsibility model that says you're responsible for securing your data and you're responsible for governance. And so it can be a barrier because when folks start thinking about, well, how do I get these disparate data sources in one place? How do I make organizations aware that it would be beneficial for them to share data that they're not used to having to share? How do I get the budget to do all this? And then how do I make it secure and compliant at the same time, right? So that's a challenge.
Yeah. Y'all are overwhelming me just a little bit. And I'm sure you are for our attendees as well, because this sounds like such a big problem. So I want to flip the narrative a little bit. And Jeff, I'm going to start with you with this one. What are some things you guys have talked a little bit about governance already, data resiliency programs? What are some elements that should be included in these things as agencies know these challenges exist, are working to move in directions to better secure and share their information and their data more effectively? What are some elements, Jeff, that should be included in a policy like that?
Well, I can answer you with an unfortunately very consistent result that we get when we do research on this topic or when we talk to customers. Specifically, when you think about securing data and keeping it compliant, you need cooperation between your governance, risk, and compliance team, your IT security team, and then all the people who actually have the data, right? Whether they are your storage teams, your virtualization teams, your physical server, application owners, whatever. What we have found for years, and this is slowly getting better, is that there is very poor alignment between my security teams, my infrastructure teams, and my governance, risk, and compliance teams. Specifically, we had a ransomware trend survey that we released in June of this year, which found that 52% of organizations, and this is about 1,300 organizations globally we surveyed, said that either a significant or a complete overhaul is needed between the ways that their compliance teams, their security teams, and their infrastructure teams work together. 37% said some improvement is needed, which, if you do the math, means that only 11% of respondents. Now, this isn't just public sector, but there were a lot of state and local and federal level government people who were interviewed. Only 11% of those said, yeah, we've got it all covered. We're working together the way that we need to in this. So if I could say things that folks should focus on, we've talked about challenges. One of the things that are in our control is just getting those three groups of people to talk to each other early in the process so that we don't make mistakes or find that we're exposed on the compliance side in ways that we didn't think about going into the problem.
Yeah. Uh, those numbers are a little are a little scary, but I can't say they're shocking to me. And I see Rebecca smiling, so I'm guessing they're not shocking to her either. What elements would you add on, Rebecca, to what Jeff was saying about what should be in a good data governance or data resiliency policy?
Yeah, I would just add on from a different perspective from the chief data officer's role. First, I heard several times, quite often actually, people from different agencies will tell me, I don't even know what data we have. So how do I know what to share? So data lineage and the visibility to the data we have through data cataloging, that's really critical element. So it's also challenging to track the data as it move across different departments and the different environments. So centralize the metadata and the lineage platform, the data governance platform that spans all data sources, clouds and on-prem and legacy systems, that would be a solution. The second one would be granular and policy-based access controls. So data sharing is a big um, initiative here. We actually have a law just passed
Hmm.
to promote data sharing across different agencies here in Hawaii. But what I heard is that everyone's willing to share the data to support others, but they need to ensure the data use is always in compliance. So to enable this, we really need a data and a field level access policies and tools. So people can see who has access to what part of the data that I am responsible for securing and for what purposes. And when there is a policy change or there is a risk, I can easily revert it back, the access.
Yeah.
So that tool is really important to enable the sharing. The third one is about the unified data classification, like
Mm.
PI information.
Mm.
Education would have PI information, health would have it, human services would have, law enforcement would have it. How can we make sure that we classify them in the consistently and protect it? So to reduce risk of any data leakage there. The last one is about the real-time monitoring and the data integrity. Because
Hmm.
with the adoption of AI, data quality and integrity plays a more and more critical role today. So I see data quality come up in a lot of conferences, but there's not 100% accurate or perfect data anywhere because we're generating every second, right, new data. So this is a journey which require not only initial checking, tagging, tagging the data quality is red, green, yellow, or testing, but also constant real-time monitoring as new data is generated. And data poisoning can happen at any time. People can just attack and poison our algorithm with biased data.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing effort.
Yeah. I think Jeff, you said something in our prep call that we had for this session that I thought was really interesting. You said data is not information. I think that's what you said, if I'm quoting you right. And I think that is so critical based on what Rebecca just said, because I think sometimes we muddle these terms together. And I know I've been guilty of it before, right? There's all this data, there's so many insights that could potentially come from the data, but it's not information unless you're using it in the way that it's being properly used, it's being properly vetted. There's so many steps that need to go through here. I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on a little bit of that kind of concept of what Rebecca was just talking about, and I think what you were sharing in the pre-call.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm delighted to hear Rebecca mention the issues of data quality from the outset and then guarding against data poisoning. It's for sure true even before we put AI or machine learning algorithms pointed at data sets that if we have data that's not reliable, we're going to draw bad conclusions from it and we're not going to achieve the objectives for citizens that we want to achieve. When you start getting even to machine learning and certainly to large language model AI, as we are now in agentic AI, we are seeing initiatives globally around responsible AI and All of us are living here in the United States. We're a litigious group of people, generally speaking, compared to the global sample. And it is certainly the case that governments and companies are going to find themselves needing to justify decisions that they have made based on pointing large language models at AI data sets, and be able to show, as Rebecca said, that they are not making biased decisions, that they can justify the data that they use to train their model, that they can show when they're challenged in court, which they will be, that they really were acting without bias, that they were acting with citizens' best interests at heart, with the best data that they could curate to train their models and to base decisions on. Again, um, as you get to a state of affairs which we're already at, and it's just accelerating, where we've got essentially black box systems that are making decisions that affect real people's lives, all of that data quality issues and being able to recover from potential attacks via data poisoning, either from outside actors or from, disgruntled internal actors acting for whatever reason, all that gets to be a lot more in focus. Fortunately for us at Veeam, we protect data all over the place, so it comes in very happy because we can typically give you places to roll back to if bad things happen. But the bigger concern is 100% what Rebecca was mentioning around data quality up front and then guarding that data so that you can prove that you're using it responsibly down the road.
Yeah. All right. So we are already more than halfway through this training. So I do want to remind our audience to throw your questions in early and often. But I want to move a little bit here into use cases, lessons learned, best practices. And so, Jeff, I'll start with you. A lot of your government partners are in a state very similar to Rebecca, right? They're trying new things, they're looking for new solutions. So I'm curious if there are any tools or technologies that you think are really helping agencies as they look to kind of modernize their data governance practices and strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the elements of data governance, of course, is resilience, right?
Mhm.
It's necessary that your data be survivable. We are finding folks getting a lot more serious about creating multiple copies of the data. If it's cloud-based data, at the very least, putting it into another tenant, so that if something bad happens in the tenant that they're in, they can recover. There was actually a kind of a very significant case in Australia last year where a large pension fund that had gone all in on Google Cloud um, was not aware that there was an expiration date for their tenant when they created this asset in Google Cloud that served about 600,000 retirees with about $125 billion US dollars in assets, and it expired, and the whole tenant went away after 1 year live. The only way that they recovered who owned what of that $125 billion in various people's retirement funds was because they had a backup out of the tenant and they were able to recover in about a week. But if you think about what that recovery would have looked like without a backup out of the tenant, it would have been either impossible or extremely, extremely difficult to do. So around governance, the idea that despite the security of modern systems, you still need to plan around worst case scenarios and you still need to make sure that that data is resilient is very important. Um, Rebecca mentioned before the need to automate policies for classifying data. I mean, it's certainly true you have to do that. I remember this has been several years ago, over a decade ago, but the National Archives and Records Administration in DC, right near where you are, came up with a policy called the Capstone Policy a good while ago, over a decade ago, because they realized that agencies were not going to convince their end users, in particular their most senior and critical end users, to manually go in and click the emails that were high severity or high importance or the files that were high importance. So their capstone policy at NARA just said, you know what, we're going to take the top executives of the organization and we're going to save everything of theirs because there's a good chance that if senior executives have eyes on it, it's critical data. That was helpful, but the more we can automate these sort of things and get a little bit beyond just saving everything from the top 15 percent of the most senior people in the org, it's really important. And it's exciting that we've got people like Rebecca in the chief data officer role that are now looking at how to roll that out for governments of states like Hawaii.
I'm now stuck on this NARA thing. And Rebecca, I'm going to get to you in a second, but I would think that with automation, that's gotta help because there's got to be pictures of their kids graduating high school in there and recipes that things are being sold and sent around the office, and all of that information is getting stuck. And so figuring out what matters when you
Right.
have so much stuff in there is really difficult to do. So, and an interesting problem to solve. Rebecca, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh, no problem. You're talking about the tools and technologies, and I love your comment about the different type of the data. Some are relevant, some might not be relevant, right? So that's the one tool we're looking into is a data governance tool, uh, where you can catalog in the data, you can identify what data we have, and so we can search. When we try to solve the business problem, we can search on who owns what data. Rebecca has 5 data sets. And this is a summary of her data sets, the data elements that can see what is more relevant for me. And you reminded me of a one thing I really want to mention here is one kind of a mistake or people tend to make is that try to make it perfect at
Ah,
first. Yeah, I try to identify all the data, make it a perfect. Let's catalog all the data. Let's, classify all the data to begin with. So that's challenging because the data, the volume is overwhelming, and it's a mission impossible to do everything at once. It's ongoing effort, just like a quality, because new data is generated. And it's really important to focus on small things. Like even for the governance tool, we don't intend to catalog all the data. We don't intend to, classify all the data to start with. We will start with certain use cases. For example, disaster recovery or disaster readiness, right? We want to make sure that we are supporting that use case to identify all the data, catalog all the data, and secure all the data for that use case. And different departments could have different use cases. Then we go along that way. So in that case, we're moving, filtering out, focusing on the more important data sets that we should govern first. So that's one tool. The second tool is, again, interoperability is really important in my mind. Yeah. So integration and data sharing, that's very important. So a tool wise, that should have a data sharing platform where I can see everyone's data and I can, not the data itself, I can see the metadata of everyone who owns what the data. And Rebecca cannot share this data with me, has this data, but she cannot share with me because of this law. So all the policies are automated in that platform. So I can easily automatically request access to that data set and with my reason why I need this data for how long, at what granularity level, so people can easily approve it. And also, as a data owner, I can say that, hey, based on the compliance reasons, I cannot allow you to print it out because I don't trust Rebecca. Rebecca could print it out, bring it to Starbucks, and leave on the table there. So, and I don't allow Rebecca to download it to her laptop. So she can only work in the office. So we need to have a platform that enable that functionality. In that case, if we give people that security of the data in sharing, people would be willing to share. And in addition to that, that platform should be able to enable machine learning, AI, all those analysis. You can't be that you can't allow Rebecca to download, you can't allow Rebecca to print, but in the meantime, you don't have the capability for Rebecca to conduct her analysis to solve her business problem. So we need to make sure we secure it and we empower the user by using it. Yeah, so both tools, we're adopting a use case driven approach. We want to laser focus on the small projects and build on small success step by step. Yep.
I particularly like you pointing out disaster recovery as a use case because obviously as a data protection company, that's something near and dear to our heart here at Veeam. You also point out the fact that you need to identify what the critical applications are and what the critical data sets are to make that whole exercise happen, which brings us back to the notion that we're not talking about technical problems here. We're talking about business and organizational problems, right? I
Mhm.
don't care how great the tool is that you get from your cloud provider, your security provider, your data protection company like Veeam. If I don't have the actual agency heads and the line of business owners telling me this is what our citizens need, this is priority zero that has to be up and running first, I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
And I have seen far too many times um, the the decision taken to let the technical side of the house design and handle the solutions for that kind of use case like disaster recovery because the business or the elected officials or agencies can't be involved in making the decision. They don't have time, they don't have desire. And of course you get a bad outcome when that happens, right? Technical solutions can't solve it unless I actually know the business solutions that I've got to solve for.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I totally agree. For example, disaster readiness, we're supporting our governor's office of disaster and resilience, recovery and resilience. We're supporting them. They're
Mhm.
playing the leading role to work with the different agencies, departments to figure out what kind of data they would need. We are just the technical enablers. We make sure that, hey, we want to make sure the secure sharing, we ensure that security of your data, and we enable you with the platform so you can conduct your analysis. Yeah, so there's no silver bullet. People say, oh, I have this tool. Oh, I have this AI now. I have that now. It's about how you use it, what business problem you try to solve with it. And that's how you can create impact. The technology alone doesn't protect the data, doesn't solve business problems.
Yeah. I think it's it is so interesting because you do hear it now with AI all the time. It's like, well, let's just sprinkle some AI on top and that'll fix everything. And I'm like, I'm not quite sure it's gonna happen just like that. But I think there is a sentiment from non-technologists out there that you could just, buy something new and it's gonna fix everything. But it always comes back to people and process. Every single time it comes back to people and process. And then technology is that distant third over there in the corner. All right, so we are almost out of time today. So I want to get a few more questions in here in rapid fire format. So, one of them, and Rebecca, I'll start with you. I think, I feel like has been the word of the last 2 to 3 years. Creeping in on its dominance, though, right now is this move for efficiency and productivity. I'm
Mhm.
curious about, as agencies are looking at and for you all in Hawaii, as agencies are looking at data governance policy, data resiliencies programs, what should agencies keep in mind to make them as effective as they possibly can be?
Mm. I think the first thing is business focused, solving the business problems, not just looking for technology. And once they define the business problems, then they can work with us to find the IT solution. And the second thing, yeah, I think is important is always to make sure that to me, I came from private sector. I did consulting for 24 years, so always important for me to figure out whatever project I do, what's the business impact?
Mm,
Yeah, track the impacts, and that would help them to prioritize the different use cases and also to make sure that we're on the right path, right? Yeah, and also don't do big bangs. Focus on the
yeah.
specific use case. Yeah, and try to do it quickly. If with AI today, I'm all for AI, but AI as a tool to support people. People make the decision. People use the tool. It's just like Excel to people and help me to do my work faster and easier and improve the operational efficiency, but it should never ever make decision for me. Yeah, and the business is still decision should still be made by human being because AI is not 100% accurate, right? It's never 100% accurate. So we need to
Right.
make sure that we use our judgment and use our critical thinking when we get the input from AI and use it wisely and responsibly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we've got a couple questions in here from our attendees, and Jeff, I'll start with you on this one. It says, "What if your organization is behind on technology, but maybe you're working with an organization that's a little bit further ahead?" You know, Rebecca was talking about the islands of Hawaii, and they're all kind of
Mhm.
doing different things here. If you're trying to work with organizations who are on a different level than you, whether that's technology, policy, personnel, maybe you have less of a skilled workforce, are there ways to bridge that gap in more effective collaboration with those teams or organizations?
Well, I'm not going to talk about data formats because that's obviously a problem
Yeah.
that's got to be solved. If I've got, disparate data sets that are in different formats, that's got to be normalized, or at least we've got to find some way to make that work together if cooperation is going to happen. What I have seen a lot, and the advice that I would give an agency that finds itself in that position, you are going to end up inheriting the security and compliance mandates of the more secure organization that you're finding yourself working with, whether you want to or not. I think that we are all finding now, I know we even Veeam as a vendor, we are spending time now that we were not spending 5 years ago for any bid that we're involved in, answering security questions about how securely our software is coded and what our internal processes are for making sure that customer data doesn't get compromised and things like that, and appropriately so. So if you're in the position of working with a more mature organization, it can be an opportunity for you to improve by virtue of adopting the things that they're asking you to do. So what I would say is, don't see the frustrations that are going to come up working with an organization that's further along the resilience or the compliance path than you are as frustrations. See them as great forcing functions for getting your practice where it needs to be, because that is in fact what they are. So that's the one piece of advice that I would give. The other piece of advice that I would give is, you should alert your leadership that there are going to be that kind of challenge. If they're not expecting it, if they think that the only issue is making data sets or processes available to other agencies that didn't used to have them before, they're going to be unpleasantly surprised when they realize that there might be hygiene that your organization has to be embracing that you didn't have to embrace before.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a very unpleasant surprise for sure. All right, final question for both of you. And Rebecca, it's a two-parter. I'll start with you. We are in a time, I think, of great transformation. The adoption of AI, the changes in the pace at which we are acquiring new data is astronomical to even 15 years ago. So it's a crazy transformational period right now. So what do you expect to see evolve in this space of securing and scaling agency data over the next couple of years? And part two, where do you want what do you want attendees who are listening today, what do you want them to take away from this session?
Yeah, as a data person, anticipate major shifts in the way agencies approach data, especially with AI. So, driven by both technological innovation, you see the new AI improvement every month almost, right? And also the rising public expectations. People say, hey, if I get this service from the private sector, why can't I expect the same from the public sector? So several things here is one, data would be treated as a critical infrastructure. It's no longer just an asset. It's a core to service delivery, to the crisis response, and to the public trust. The second thing, I expect AI and the Gen AI integration will mature and will require more guardrails, but agencies are moving from AI pilots to enterprise scale implementations. We are doing a lot of pilots here to improve operational efficiency. I can see them going into production. A lot of manual workflows, processes can leap ahead, from the old traditional system all the way until automated by AI agents in the future. Yeah, and also the increased standardization that shares services. Data sharing is always core to me because I see so many business problems require data sharing. Yeah, and hopefully there will be a AI-ready data infrastructure, and the data environment often not ready now. Yeah, we need to have the governance, consolidate the data, and put them out there and control the quality, tagging the data. For example, once people have a Copilot, they have access to everything. They didn't know, oh, I have access to this data. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll be more ready in the future. And the key takeaway, I think, still focus on business problems, start small, and bring people along with the small process success. Because it's change management is a big challenge here, and we have to bring people along and empower people with AI tools. Like with the AI tools now, we're helping the agencies, the departmental, business people to create their own AI agents. It's not us creating for them. Yeah, and the cross-agency collaboration, always keep in mind of interoperability. We're together here to serve the citizens.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, that's a hard act to follow, but give me a prediction for the future here and a takeaway.
So I love what Rebecca just said. There's a concept in development, especially continuous innovation, continuous deployment, sort of DevOps operations of shift left, where you move things like security, where you move things like data hygiene too early in the development process instead of trying to graft them on at the end when you're about to roll the application out, because that adds delays and it adds gaps and other issues. I think what we're going to see is for any kind of programs that agencies are rolling out, we're going to be shifting left both data resilience operations, because as we depend more on data, we need to make sure that bad guys can't delete it, or we can't have accidents that poison it or get rid of our confidence in it. And we're also going to be shifting left the kind of interoperability and data sharing as a requirement for all new applications that Rebecca was talking about. I also love her focus on taking small wins so that you build organizational momentum for new projects. There's a very old saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And it is true that rolling out something that is an incremental improvement that shows a path we can follow for more AI, for more data sharing between different agencies and departments is going to get us where we want to go and providing better citizen services faster. So great conversation, really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your insights with us today. And Rebecca, thanks for waking up early. I saw one of maybe your colleagues from Hawaii was in the chat early. So we've got a bunch of early birds on the call today, and we very much appreciate that. But Jeff and Rebecca, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. Just a few quick reminders that there are some wonderful resources available for you to download. So make sure you check those out before you log off. We will also be sending you a link to the on-demand version of this training tomorrow, so you'll be able to review it again or maybe send it along to one of your colleagues, of course. But on behalf of GovLoop and Veeam, I hope you enjoyed today's session. And like always, we really appreciate and value the work that you do. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next training. Bye, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.